The Interstellar Collective had, over the course of 14 centuries, perfected survival technology to such a degree that the very concept of dying from environmental exposure had become statistically impossible, not improbable. Impossible. The mathematics had been peer-reviewed by 7 different species, each more pedantic than the last, and the conclusion remained ironclad: if you had a collective certified survival unit, you would live. Period. End of discussion. Please stop filing redundant safety reports. The Marine Survival Unit, Model ZX7749, represented the pinnacle of this achievement. Dropped into any aquatic environment, it would deploy a flotation platform, generate a protective atmospheric bubble, synthesize nutrition from available molecules, and broadcast distress signals across 17 different frequency bands. It ran on ambient electromagnetic energy, backed up by thermal differentials, with a tertiary system that could extract power from literally anything, including, and this was a direct quote from the manual, the faint cosmic background radiation of reality itself. The engineers who designed it were very proud, perhaps too proud. Hubris, as it turned out, was not a uniquely human flaw, though humanity had certainly refined it to an art form. Tethys 7 was a water world, 97% ocean, with scattered volcanic island chains that broke the surface like the teeth of some enormous buried beast. It was a popular route for inter-system transport, the kind of place where nothing ever went wrong, because the collective had mapped every current, catalogued every weather pattern, and installed enough monitoring stations to detect a butterfly's wing beat from orbit, which made it the perfect location for everything to go catastrophically, hilariously wrong. The storm arrived with the subtlety of a freight hauler crashing through a symphony performance. Electromagnetic chaos rippled across the sky, turning the atmosphere into a screaming mess of interference that made every sensor simultaneously report that yes, everything was fine, and also everything was on fire, and also nothing existed anymore. The transport ship, carrying 247 passengers from 18 different species, hit the maelstrom like a brick hitting a wall made of other, angrier bricks. The evacuation protocols worked flawlessly. Everyone got their survival unit. Everyone deployed according to procedure. And then, with the kind of cosmic timing that suggested the universe had a mean sense of humor, every single unit encountered the same fatal flaw: they all ran on electromagnetic energy. The storm, being electromagnetic in nature, essentially screamed static directly into their power cores until they gave up and died. On flotation platform 712, a Vrexian named Kolmath watched his survival unit's display flicker through every language it knew before settling on a helpful message: "Catastrophic failure, have a nice day." Then it went dark. He bobbed on the inflatable platform, all 4 of his arms clutching the safety handles, watching the rain turn the ocean into a frothing nightmare, and contemplated the irony of drowning while holding 14,000 credits worth of impossible-to-fail technology. On platform 719, a Quilnari Huddle family watched their unit spark, emit a smell that their translator unhelpfully identified as burning optimism, and then slump over like a disappointed parent. The smallest member of the huddle suggested they try hitting it. They tried hitting it. It remained disappointed and dead. On platform 723, a human named Marcus Chen, originally from somewhere called Nevada, though he'd been spacing for 6 years now, watched his survival unit do something that looked impressive, but was actually just various capacitors exploding in sequence. The final explosion launched the unit's main processor into the ocean with enough force that it skipped twice before sinking. "Well," Marcus said to the storm, because talking to weather was apparently what his brain defaulted to under stress. That's just fantastic. The platforms at least still floated. They were basically expensive pool toys, designed to bob along until the robot attached to them fixed everything. Without the robots, they were just very confused pool toys, drifting in random directions, occasionally bumping into each other like a sad support group for failed technology. Marcus looked at the storm. He looked at his dead robot. He looked at the dark shape of an island, maybe half a kilometer away, visible in flashes when lightning decided to show off. Then he looked at the rope locker on his platform, standard issue, 20 meters of braided synthetic line. "You know what?" he said. "I've had beach vacations worse than this." Nobody heard him. The storm was too loud, and the nearest platform was 50 meters away, and everyone else was doing the sensible thing, sitting still, conserving energy, waiting for rescue, because rescue always came. The collective was very good at rescue. It was just a matter of time. Marcus checked his platform's emergency supplies. Knife, check. Rope, check. Waterproof bag, check. Emergency rations that tasted like optimistic cardboard, check. He took all of it, sealed it in the bag, tied the rope around his waist, and did something that would later be described in official reports as inadvisable, reckless, and somehow successful, which is frankly more disturbing. He swam for the island. The ocean tried very hard to kill him. It was personal. Waves smacked him like they'd been practicing. Currents pulled in directions that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Something that might have been a piece of debris or might have been a very confused fish hit him in the ribs. But Marcus had grown up swimming in cold mountain lakes where his friends dared each other to touch the bottom, had spent summers body surfing in water that actively wanted to slam him into sand, and had once, memorably, swum away from a date that was going badly at a beach party. He had experience with water that didn't like him. 40 minutes later, he crawled onto volcanic sand, coughed up what felt like a gallon of ocean, and lay there while the storm raged overhead. The island had trees, some kind of bamboo-looking thing, tall and straight and swaying like they were enjoying the weather. There were rocks. There was debris from something, probably an old monitoring station. Marcus looked at all of this. He looked at his knife and rope. He thought about the fact that dawn would come eventually, and rescue would probably come eventually, and until then he had two options: sit on a beach in a freezing storm, or do something about it. His ancestors hadn't crossed continents and oceans, and eventually entire solar systems, by sitting around waiting for conditions to improve. "Right then," he said, standing up. "Let's see if I remember how this works." By the time the first light of dawn turned the sky from black to gray, the storm had exhausted itself the way toddlers do after a tantrum, leaving everything wet and tired and faintly embarrassed. The ocean settled into rolling swells. The platforms, still dutifully floating, began drifting closer to the island. Colmath was the first to notice something wrong, or rather something right that shouldn't be right. There was smoke rising from the island, actual smoke, the kind produced by fire, which required fuel and oxygen and some kind of ignition source, none of which should exist in a survival situation without a functioning survival unit. "Does anyone else see that?" he called across the water. The Quilnari Huddle family saw it. A Peltheran engineer saw it. A Zexian merchant saw it, and immediately began calculating the market value of whatever technology could produce fire without power. "Maybe," suggested the Peltheran, "one of the units still works." They paddled closer. The smoke became more visible. Then the structure became visible. It was a shelter, a proper shelter, maybe 3 meters long and 2 meters wide, raised off the ground on a framework of poles with a slanted roof that would shed water. It was made entirely of bamboo, lashed together with what looked like rope made from plant fibers, and it was so geometrically sound that it looked like someone had used precision instruments to measure everything. Next to it was a fire pit, lined with rocks, containing a fire that was somehow still burning despite the dampness everywhere. The fire was contained, controlled, producing steady smoke that rose in a column, and behind the shelter, extending up the volcanic slope, was a tower. It was 5 meters tall, if it was a centimeter, made from bamboo poles, lashed together in a triangular frame, with crossbeams creating a lattice structure, topped with a platform that held what appeared to be more fire and some kind of reflective surface angled toward the sky. The platforms bumped against the beach. Various species climbed off, staring at the camp with the kind of confusion usually reserved for finding out your accountant was secretly 3 smaller accountants in a trench coat. "Who?" Colmouth said slowly. "Built this?" Marcus emerged from the tree line carrying more bamboo and looking like someone who'd had a productive morning. He'd stripped down to his undershirt and pants, both still damp, and he had what appeared to be a basket woven from palm fronds hanging from his shoulder. The basket contained what looked like shellfish. "Oh hey," he said, spotting the crowd. "You guys made it. Good." I was starting to worry. There was a long silence, the kind of silence that occurs when multiple species simultaneously try to process information that doesn't fit into any existing category. "You," said the Peltheran engineer finally, "built all of this?" "Yeah, figured I should," Marcus said, setting down his bamboo and basket. "Storm was pretty bad, wasn't going to just sit there getting hypothermia." "How?" The engineer's voice had climbed into a register that suggested his reality was experiencing technical difficulties. "Your survival unit failed. All of our units failed." "Right, yeah. Mine's at the bottom of the ocean." Marcus walked over to the fire, added a piece of wood he'd apparently prepared earlier, and adjusted the burning material with a stick. "So I used what was available. Island's got bamboo, which is basically nature's building supply store. Rocks for the fire pit. Vines work great as rope once you braid them. The hard part was getting the fire started in the wet, but if you split bamboo the inside's usually dry, and you can make char cloth from your shirt if you're desperate enough." "Char cloth," Colmouth repeated, like he was trying the words out to see if they made more sense the second time. They did not. "Yeah, you know, fabric you char in low oxygen so it catches sparks easy. Then you just need friction fire. Bow drill method works, but it's hell on your hands. Got it going after maybe 40 minutes. Marcus shrugged. "Little rusty. Used to be faster." The Zexian merchant, whose species prided themselves on understanding resource exchange, raised a tentacle. "You started fire with friction." "I mean, yeah, that's how fire works at its core. Friction generates heat. Heat ignites tinder, tinder lights kindling, kindling lights fuel. Basic chemistry." "Basic," the merchant repeated faintly. "And the structure?" The Peltheran was now examining the shelter like it might contain hidden technology. "The measurements are perfect. The load distribution is optimal. You must have had some kind of scanning device." Marcus looked at him. "I have eyes and hands. You measure with your body. Pace out distances. Use arm length for reference. The bamboo's pretty uniform, so once you know how much weight each pole can handle, you just do the math. I mean, it's not complicated engineering. Humans have been building shelters for like 100,000 years. We got pretty good at it. Without computers," Colmouth said. "Yeah, obviously. Computers weren't invented until, what, century or two ago relative to our development. We made do. How? The question came from multiple sources simultaneously. Marcus blinked. Are you asking me how humans survived before computers? Yes, said the entire group. We used our brains and hands, and we figured stuff out. He looked around at the assembled aliens, noting their expressions, which ranged from confused to existentially troubled. Okay, look, I'm getting the feeling there's a bigger conversation happening here. Anyone want to explain why a shelter and a fire are apparently mind-blowing? The Peltheran sat down heavily on the sand. Because our technology works. Our species reached space because we built machines that compensated for our physical limitations. The Quilnari can't regulate temperature well, so they invented environmental suits. The Vrexians need specific atmospheric mixtures, so they engineered portable generation. I require precise measurements for everything, so I carry sensors. We specialized, we advanced, we became dependent on our tools because our tools made us better than our biology. Okay, Marcus said slowly. But you, the engineer continued, just circumvented the entire problem. Your tool failed, so you made new tools from nothing, using skills that are apparently just, what, inside your brain, ready to access. I mean, sort of. I learned this stuff. Camping trips as a kid, survival courses in my 20s because I thought they'd be fun, couple of summers working wilderness rescue. It's not magic, it's just practice. You practiced survival, Colmarth said, for recreation. Yeah, lots of humans do. Did. Still do, I guess. We call it camping. Or hiking. You go out into nature with minimal gear and see if you can manage. It's relaxing. Relaxing. The word came out like an accusation. Well, yeah. You disconnect from tech. Remember you're an animal that can do animal things, toast some food over a fire, sleep under stars. It's nice. The Quilnari Huddle family conferred among themselves in their musical language, then designated a speaker. Your species voluntarily subjects itself to survival conditions for enjoyment. Sometimes we make it harder on purpose, Marcus admitted. Like, there's this thing called ultralight backpacking, where you try to carry as little as possible, or primitive skills where you use Stone Age technology. Some people are really into it. The speaker consulted with the huddle again. Your species has recreational activities designed to simulate the conditions our ancestors fled from when they developed civilization. When you put it that way, it sounds weird. It is weird. The Peltheran was now standing, gesturing at the camp. This whole situation is weird. You built a signal tower, a 5-meter tower, in one night, in a storm, using sticks. Bamboo's pretty strong, Marcus said defensively, and the tower's just triangular lashing on a stable base. The heights for visibility. I put some of the reflective stuff from my emergency kit up top to catch light, and kept a fire going for smoke. Standard signaling procedures. There are procedures? Colmarth's voice had gone up an octave. I mean, yeah. Rule of threes, right? 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter in bad weather, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. Shelter and signaling were priorities. I've got water from the rain collection, and those shellfish are edible if you cook them. He paused. Probably edible. Like 90% sure. You're not certain? The Zexian asked. They look like the ones from the database I studied before the trip. But field identification is always a little uncertain. When in doubt, cook it thoroughly and eat a small amount first to test for reactions. Marcus shrugged. Though honestly, at a certain point hunger makes you less picky. There was another long silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the distant sound of waves. Finally, the Peltheran engineer spoke. "I have been designing survival equipment for 40 years. I have 3 degrees in environmental systems. I have personally tested equipment in 70 different hostile environments. And you are telling me that you, with no equipment, achieved better results than my life's work by using plants and rocks?" "I mean," Marcus said carefully, "your equipment would have been great if not for the storm. That doesn't make me feel better." "Look," Marcus said, "I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. Your tech is amazing. It's better than any of this in like every normal situation. I just had to improvise because normal wasn't an option. That's all this is. Improvisation with old skills. Old skills that apparently every human has just memorized," Colmath muttered. "Not every human. Plenty of people couldn't do this. But enough of us keep the knowledge alive because, I don't know, we like having options. My dad taught me knots because his dad taught him. My mum taught me fire because she learned from survival manuals. You pass it down, you practice it, you keep it ready just in case. Just in case your advanced technology fails," the Quilnari speaker said. "Well, yeah, because you don't fully trust technology. Because we invented it," Marcus said, "so we know it breaks." That statement landed like a stone in still water, ripples of implications spreading outward. The assembled survivors looked at each other, then at their dead survival units, then at the bamboo shelter that had kept one human alive and comfortable through conditions that had left the rest of them bobbing miserably in the ocean. "This is going in my report," the Peltheran said quietly. "Nobody's going to believe it, but it's going in my report." "What are you going to say?" Marcus asked. "That we spent billions developing foolproof technology and a human beat it with sticks and knowledge passed down through generations for fun. When you say it like that, it sounds embarrassing." "It is embarrassing." The engineer laughed, slightly hysterical. "It's mortifying. It's going to change procurement standards across 17 systems. Do you know how many safety boards are going to have to convene? How many engineers will have to explain why we never considered that electromagnetic storms might interfere with electromagnetic power sources?" "In fairness," Marcus said, "that does seem like an oversight." The rescue ships arrived 2 hours later, sleek vessels dropping through the atmosphere with the confidence of technology that absolutely definitely would not fail this time, probably. They landed on the beach, deployment doors opening, emergency personnel rushing out with medical scanners and thermal blankets and professionally concerned expressions. They stopped when they saw the camp. "What?" said the rescue coordinator, a Vrexian with impressive rank insignia and an expression of deep confusion. "Is that," Colmath said tiredly, "is a human demonstrating that our entire approach to survival technology might be fundamentally flawed." The coordinator looked at Marcus, who was currently showing the Quilnari Huddle family how to identify edible plants by their leaf structure. "He built this in one night, during the storm, after his survival unit failed." Colmath gestured at the shelter, the fire, the tower, using bamboo and spite. "Spite, I'm assuming. There has to be spite involved. Nobody does this without spite." The rescue coordinator walked over to Marcus, who looked up from his impromptu botany lesson and waved. "Hey, thanks for coming. Everyone here's fine, just wet and probably hungry. I've got some shellfish cooking if you want to check them for toxicity before people eat." "You," the coordinator said slowly, "built a survival camp." "Yeah, seemed like the thing to do. Without equipment. Well, I had a knife and some rope. And technically my shirt became char cloth, so that was equipment for a while before it became fire-starting material." The coordinator was silent for a long moment. "Then I'm going to need you to write a report detailing everything you did." "Sure, I can do that." "A detailed report, step by step, including how you learned these skills." "Okay, but it's going to be kind of boring. It's just basic survival stuff." "I'm going to need you to understand," the coordinator said, very seriously, "that what you consider basic survival stuff is apparently a lost art for most of the collective. We've been dependent on technology for so long that the idea of creating shelter from raw materials is, for many species, theoretically impossible." Marcus frowned. "But your ancestors must have done it. Everyone's ancestors did it. That's how species survive long enough to invent technology." "Yes, but we stopped needing to remember how. We invented better ways. And then we forgot the old ways because they were obsolete." The coordinator looked at the bamboo tower. "Except they're not obsolete. They're backup systems that run on knowledge instead of power." "Huh?" Marcus said. "Yeah, I guess that's one way to think about it." The rescue processed efficiently after that. Everyone got medical checks. Everyone got thermal blankets they didn't really need because Marcus's fire had dried them out, and everyone got loaded onto ships. The Peltheran engineer insisted on taking detailed scans of the shelter and tower, muttering about structural integrity and natural materials engineering. The Quilnari family asked if they could keep some of Marcus's woven rope as a souvenir. The Zexian merchant tried to buy the rights to market human survival skills as a training course. Marcus just wanted to know if the rescue ship had any coffee. 3 weeks later, a report circulated through collective databases. It was filed under Incident Analysis Tethys 7 Emergency Response Failure, and it was the kind of document that made comfortable bureaucrats uncomfortable. The summary read, "Following catastrophic failure of all survival units due to electromagnetic interference, 246 passengers survived via standard emergency protocols, awaiting rescue in minimal function flotation platforms. One passenger, human designation Marcus Chen, survived via construction of shelter, creation of fire, and engineering of signal tower using available natural resources. No technological assistance was utilized. All structures were created using knowledge retained from recreational survival training and cultural knowledge transmission. Passenger Chen was the only survivor who maintained core body temperature, acquired nutrition, and created effective long-range signaling. Recommend immediate review of survival protocols across all collective systems." In the recommendations section, someone had added, "Suggest investigation into human camping practices as potential emergency training framework. Also suggest adding manual survival skills to standard education curriculum because apparently we've all been one electrical storm away from bobbing helplessly in the ocean while a human builds a resort with bamboo and audacity." That last part was edited out of the official version, but it circulated in the unofficial version, which was more popular. Marcus Chen became briefly famous in the way that people who accidentally expose systematic flaws become famous. He was invited to demonstrate survival skills at various facilities. He politely declined most of them, saying he really just wanted to get back to his shipping route, thanks. He did agree to write a manual. It was titled Basic Human Survival Techniques, a primer for species who forgot how to camp. It became required reading at 7 different emergency response academies. In the margins of the digital version, someone left a comment that perfectly summarized the entire incident. "We spent 14 centuries making technology that couldn't fail. A human spent one night proving that the best technology is the knowledge you carry in your head and the willingness to use it. This is either inspiring or horrifying, and I can't decide which." Both, probably. The answer was usually both. Somewhere, on a water world called Tethys 7, a bamboo shelter still stood on a volcanic beach. It would stand for months before weather finally claimed it, and in that time it would become something of a landmark. Ships would point it out to passengers. That's where a human built a camp in a storm, they'd say, when all our technology failed, and the passengers would look and wonder and maybe, just maybe, think about what skills they'd forgotten in the name of progress. The universe, as it turned out, had a lot to learn from a species that treated survival as a hobby and refused to entirely trust the machines they'd built. It was humbling. It was frustrating. It was, in a strange way, reassuring. Because if everything failed, if all the technology and all the power and all the carefully designed systems fell apart, at least someone would probably know how to build a fire. And really, when you thought about it, that wasn't a bad foundation for a civilization.